Welcome into Tuesday Night Takes, our weekly football podcast. Thank you for watching on YouTube or listening in on Spotify. And check us out weekly as we will be uploading from here on out every week. We did not post for the last, I believe, 2 weeks because my wife and I introduced a son to our life. And, he's been in the hospital the whole time. But we're about to get out here shortly, and everything's all good there. He's just got to develop a little bit more. Either way, Nathan, how's your couple weeks been?
It's been a normal few weeks, not quite as eventful as yours, but I've just been patiently waiting to get back on.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and get right into this episode. We have a few topics for today, mainly since we haven't done it, going over the games of the AFC and NFC championship, then checking out some of the coaching moves happening in this year's NFL coaching carousel, and then going over the Super Bowl because, we're only, I think, 6 days away from that, 5 days away from something like that. It's coming up quick, and I'm very excited for that game. So either way, jumping straight into the Kansas City Chiefs, Baltimore Ravens AFC Championship game. Lay it on me. What's your takeaways from this game?
I wouldn't have expected it to be a game where you got both teams going under 20 points. Albeit, in hindsight, maybe we should have expected something more of like how the game turned out, because this year both the strengths of the Chiefs and the Ravens are their defenses. But I'll brag and say that I was not shocked at all to see the Chiefs win. As a matter of fact, I expected the Chiefs to win. Baltimore was regarded as the best team in the league, and during the regular season they looked great. Don't get me wrong, but it's one of those things where Pat Mahomes in the playoffs, I can't bet against him. That's a matchup. Even in a season where the Chiefs' offense is nowhere near where it's been in previous years, you've still got Mahomes playing quarterback, and so that's not Mahomes in the playoff is an entirely different animal.
Yeah.
So to see him march into Baltimore and pull out a tight win for them, despite their offense being outgained by the Ravens, it didn't shock me at all. And it's what I expected, and it's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I can't say, I don't remember exactly what I predicted since it's been 2 weeks since we made those predictions. But
we actually did not predict these games because of our time off.
Okay.
So we didn't even get to get predictions out for them.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Why I don't remember anything about it then. Either way,
yep.
Like you said, I'm not really shocked the Chiefs won because I think it wouldn't shock me either way, to be honest, because on one hand, you have the Chiefs, who their offense was extremely problematic. There were issues all season long, and those could have come back to haunt them easily. But also, you have Baltimore, who looks like the best team in the league all the regular season, and looks like this is the year they're going to do it. But at the same time, it's the Chiefs, it's the Ravens. Either way, it doesn't matter. And it's like you said, it is Mahomes in the playoffs. There's a lot to that. He's clearly a winner no matter what. And to me, it would have been a lot more if this was the first game they played or something like that, in the wild card round, or if instead of Baltimore versus Houston, they played the Chiefs, I may have taken Baltimore higher, or, if they didn't play Buffalo already, if the Bills didn't the Chiefs didn't play Bills before this, I would have been a lot more confident in the Ravens because we hadn't seen the Chiefs beat anybody like that. But as it comes down to it, you get that. And honestly, to me, this falls entirely, it really falls entirely on Lamar Jackson. I don't really see another way it can go because the defense held up as they should have. They didn't allow any points in the second half to Kansas City. It was a very big defensive stand, as you said, and we saw Lamar Jackson drop back every play of the second half, and it seems like at least, and do nothing. And, okay, yeah, play calling, that's awesome. Why are you going away from the run? However, it doesn't matter when Lamar Jackson's overthrowing any ball that's wide open. Like, there was 2 specific shots down the sideline, I remember, that were just massively overthrown.
Yeah.
And they were wide open. One to Nelson Aguilar, the other one maybe to Odell. Not entirely sure. But that's the problem with Lamar, in my opinion, is he's not a passer. He just isn't. To me, he's not a great quarterback. He's a great football player. So you have to find that blend, and it's just not going to happen right now. And I don't know. Is this their missed window? Do you think they've missed their window now with this team being eliminated this year?
Yeah, I mean, unless Lamar. Before I go into that, I will say this: you and I would agree that Baltimore lost this game more than Kansas City won it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get that out of the way. Those two turnovers were absolutely crucial in Baltimore's comeback effort. But
Not to
to go
mention
back to what,
the triple coverage interception.
yeah,
What is
yeah,
he doing? What is he doing?
they
To
were
Isaiah
they were moving the
Likely.
ball. Yeah, it, and then the goal line fumble was just tragic. But nonetheless, um, I mean, unless Lamar can miraculously develop into an elite level, and maybe not even elite level because his legs can certainly make up for lack of talent, lack of arm talent. But if he can develop into a great passer, pocket passer, then the Ravens window is still open. However, that's a tall task.
Yeah.
For a player who's now a seasoned vet in the league to be able to suddenly take his game up to another level. And then also you have to account for the fact that that they're now paying him like a top 5 quarterback, like a top 3 quarterback, which puts restrictions on how much money you can spend on the rest of your team.
Yeah.
They're going to have to lose some guys, so it's going to make that a lot more difficult. And so if I'd say yes or no as if that window's closed, I would have to lean towards yes, it is closed.
Yeah. I mean, they rely on the run game throughout the whole season and then abandon it, and then the
Mm-hmm.
defense, and you're going to end up losing. You lose Mike McDonald, who's considered apparently as basically a Sean McVay of defense. That's what I think I've been
Mm-hmm.
hearing multiple times. And now he's going to be in that division with Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, which will be super interesting. But either way, we'll get to that later. You're going to lose him on defense. You're losing Patrick Queen on defense. Justin Madubuike, who had an amazing year this year. It's a lot of loss on defense in just 3 guys, and there are more, but I'm not going to go into all that right now. Either way,
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I do think this window is closed for Baltimore. I think it was a short-lived window. I think their window should have started about 4 years ago or so, and it
Yeah.
really didn't. Like the first time they were the 1 seed and they lost to Tennessee, I don't think like we were shocked because they were the 1 seed, but at the same time, I don't think it was like a super big expectation because that was kind of Lamar's first bid. And now he's 2-4 in the playoffs. So, and the only teams he's beaten are a crappy Ryan Tannehill and a rookie quarterback this year. So it's just not a great look there.
Yeah, it sort of reminded me of the year where the Utah Jazz were, I don't know if they were the 1 seed out of the West or if they were one of the top seeds out of the West. It was one of those two. And of course they get knocked out early. The team that overperforms in the regular season and then they get to the playoffs and they're not able to go 10 rounds with the top dogs.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and keep it in mind, Baltimore, that y'all still didn't beat Pittsburgh this year, so we can move on. All right, we'll go to the Niners and the Lions game now. This was definitely the better game of the weekend. Going into halftime, Detroit was up 24-7. And I'm going to go on, like you said with the Chiefs game, I think the Lions lost this game more than the Niners won once again. And there are multiple reasons going into that. Yes, you can say that the Niners did all the things right, but you get a helmet catch off of the Kendall Vildor who knocks a pass with his helmet and it goes straight up in the air. That ball could have bounced left, it could have bounced right, it could have bounced forwards. It bounced straight up and Brandon Ayuk caught it. That's just lucky. It just is. I mean, it's a great catch, obviously, but in terms of which direction the ball bounces, it literally determines the game. And they don't score that touchdown without it. They don't get ahead without it. And then not to mention, the Dan Campbell issues. But what do you think about this game?
Yeah, you and I and our other buddy, we were talking to each other at halftime about how the season was going to end the same way that it started with the Chiefs-Lions matchup. So, sorry Lions fans for jinxing that for y'all. But, I mean, yeah, I was shocked because they went into halftime and they were up big. You could imagine that San Francisco was feeling awfully deflated. But, I mean, they just didn't give up. They still had a whole nother half of football to play and they played it well. And the Lions defense didn't. I remember there was a sideline shot around, I believe the Niners had cut the lead to 3 or so, or maybe they tied it up. I think they tied it up. They tied it up at 24, and they were showing some shots of Lions players on the sideline. They just looked flat, dull. They had no life left in them, as if the game was already over and they were down 30 points. Game was tied. they were still plenty in the game. But they just, once they saw that lead start to dwindle away, there wasn't anything the offense could do to really get going to the point that I'm not even going to talk about the offense, actually. It was the defense that really ruined it for Detroit. You can't expect to win a game giving up 24 points in the second half. It was no one's shocked to hear that the Lions defense is what lost them the game and ultimately ended their season. But they just weren't, they're a young, inexperienced team in the playoffs. So going down and seeing that momentum quickly dwindle away like it did in the second half is just, it's a lot to have to deal with for a young team like that who hasn't been there in that situation before. So it's not really shocking to see it go the way it did. However, we were certainly surprised to see the flip script suddenly in the second half.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it was tough, and there's not, like I said, there was a lot of lucky things that happened here for San Francisco, like that bounce. And there was something else that I actually had in mind to mention in this podcast, but I completely forgot about it. That would have helped it. But one thing I do want to bring up is the Dan Campbell issues or potential issues. I don't really know. What are your thoughts on all the takes on Dan Campbell and whether, did he lose that game to you?
Are we speaking in regards to the fourth downs?
Yeah,
his fourth down call.
Go for it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, if you're I can give him props for committing to his philosophy of being aggressive and going for it on fourth down, because certainly it pays off from time to time, and you have to live with the fact that you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. I don't think, I think if you start to bash Dan Campbell for being a bad coach because he goes for it on fourth down too much, then you're entirely missing the point that last year, halfway through the season, Detroit had one win. And this time, this year, they're in the NFC Championship going toe to toe with the 49ers. Yeah. He had a big part in bringing them there. So, me personally, I would rather my coach not go for it on fourth down as much, but if that's going to help my team get to a conference championship, then by all means. I mean, you win some, you lose some. It's as simple as that. I don't think we can judge Dan Campbell entirely as a coach based off of some fourth downs that you think might have lost them the game. And as much as you think they lost them the game, the defense in the second half is what lost them the game. It wasn't a few missed fourth down conversions.
Right, I agree with that. But also, not to place blame on one person, but Josh Reynolds was the pinnacle of just consistency all year long. He became almost a solid, legitimately solid receiver throughout the season, and a guy they went to really often. And he just dropped 3 or 4 passes in the second half, it seemed like. And 2 of them were the fourth downs, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. One of them for sure. Then there was another drop he had it was a ball that went behind him. He was on like a post route about 10 yards downfield. I believe that was on a third down. But either way, just dropping those passes, things that were, the routine things. And that wasn't like they were broken up. No, he just straight up dropped them. That's tough. And I don't think it was on Dan Campbell at all, in my opinion. I think you go for those because that's where you've gotten all year. You've done this for a full year, and now you're 12-5 in the NFC Championship. You're the Lions in the NFC Championship. Let's not forget that. And this has gotten you this far. Yes, go for it. But I will say maybe the second time when they're up by, I believe it was they were up by 4, go for it that time, because now you're putting the pressure on San Francisco to be getting 7 instead of just 3 and then whatever. Yes, they have to get a touchdown to go above, but the second time, if you've already missed it once on a fourth down, probably should just go ahead and kick it, get the points, and move on. And that could have won them this game. So yeah, that is. It could have. It's partially on Dan Campbell. There's a part of it on Josh Reynolds. There's a part of it on the defense. It's obviously a team loss. It's a team sport. But either way, yeah. Anything else you have to add on these 2 games this past weekend?
I don't think so. I think we hit on just about everything we needed to.
Yeah, and that does obviously set up the Chiefs and the Niners for a Super Bowl rematch from 4 years ago. Doesn't seem like that was 4 years ago, honestly, but this should be a good one. I'm excited to watch it, and we'll be watching it together, so that'll be very cool.
Yes, we will.
And either way, let's go ahead and get into our next topic. We have the coaching carousel from this offseason. This is I don't know. There's a lot going on in this offseason. Obviously, I think the number one topic is the Chargers ditching Brandon Staley in the middle of the year and bringing in Jim Harbaugh. What were you expecting Jim Harbaugh to come to the NFL first off?
At some point, certainly, yeah. I don't think it worked out perfectly for him that he was able to leave Michigan on a high note and return to the NFL to take a coaching job where he comes in with plenty of talent and, most importantly, a star quarterback in Justin Herbert. So, was I surprised? No, not at all. It was just kind of a matter, it was kind of we never got a ton of reassurance what he was going to do until it was official what he was doing. There was rumors thrown around here and there. He kept him and his group, they kept pretty quiet on his future concerning Michigan and NFL offers, but I fully expected him to go to the Chargers. So for it to happen, I was like, yeah, you're not, if you're gonna ditch Michigan where you're at right now to jump to the NFL, you have to do it now where you can go take the reins of the Chargers and come in with a star quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, there was talks of him, meeting with, I believe, the Falcons, the Raiders. I feel like that was really about it. Maybe one or two more. But no, I'm pretty sure I was either on my channel or maybe just talking to you and our other friends about Harbaugh was coming to the NFL and he was going to the Chargers, because why wouldn't you go to Justin Herbert? And you're in LA, you have Justin Herbert. What else could you want? And you already have a pedigree. If I'm not mistaken, his NFL record is like 46-19 or something like that from his days back in San Francisco and whatnot. And that's a pretty good record. All right, there. That's not bad. So, I mean, there's not a whole lot to be upset about there as a Chargers fan. You're getting a guy who's proven himself at multiple levels. He's a championship head coach one way or another. He's obviously the biggest hire of this go-around. And it's not something I think is surprising. But the next one I have is Mike Macdonald, the Baltimore Ravens defensive coordinator I did mention earlier, is now the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks over there in the West Coast. A hire that, I'm not too shocked about in the long run, but I don't really feel like while it was happening, I don't feel like I heard a whole lot about him to the Seahawks. I kept hearing him to the Falcons at one point, but not the Seahawks. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, new youngest coach, I believe. What is he, 31 years old?
Is he really that young? I'm going to look that up, but go ahead.
I think. I believe his hire made him the youngest coach in the NFL now. Maybe not the youngest hire ever.
36.
But 30, okay. I don't know what I'm saying. Whatever. Anyways, 36, 31 for an NFL coach is young regardless.
He actually, Jason Peters on that roster is older than him, so.
That's the way the NFL's going now. They want to get all the young minds in control of these teams. I don't blame them. Trying to catch up with the times where the NFL's going, but it feels kind of like a Pete Carroll hire. He goes out and gets a defensive guy. Maybe for some fans, maybe they wanted an offensive guy just because you look at the coaches that are getting their teams into the playoffs, and a vast majority of them that are moving through the playoffs are offensive coaches. But I think it's one of the better hires that you could have made on the defensive side of the ball, at least. You get a young guy in there, maybe he can bring in some shades of Pete Carroll. I don't know what he's like as a person, so I don't know if he quite has the energy that Pete Carroll has. But he's a young guy, so maybe that will help him resonate with the players well. But obviously, in terms of his product, he helped lead the Ravens to have one of the best defense in the league that we saw this season. So with with Seattle's defense being the weakness of their team, you could assume that he'll be able to, in at least 2 years or so, get that turned around. And if they can get somebody to either whether they can keep Geno Smith playing for a little bit, playing at a decent level, or if they draft a rookie this year to play quarterback, get him playing well, then there's something here with the Seattle team. There's no reason to think that they can't be a replication of the Texans this season, where you get the young rookie, quarterback, and then you get the young defensive coach to come in, and they're able to turn the tides immediately. So I could see Seattle quickly becoming a top dog in the league.
Yeah, which I mean, one thing that's interesting that you said about the Texans, being like a repeat of that. One thing I don't think gets brought up enough is the fact that the Texans roster really isn't all that good. There's a lot of guys who've been around a couple years, maybe 2-3 years, but none of them have done anything. Maybe they've shown out a little bit this year. The Christian Harris's, Nico Collins, who obviously this year did really good, but before that was pretty middling, not a very great player. But yeah, just things like that. But the Seahawks have a much better start. You talk about the defense, and they have a good start right now, at least, even though it is the kind of bare bones. You have Jordan Brooks, a solid linebacker. You have the two corners in Witherspoon and Woolen. That's a great start right there. You got what's the edge rusher's name? Boye Mafe. I couldn't come up with it for a second there, but some young guys who you can potentially develop and make good. And one thing that Mike McDonald did that's another underrated topic is he took a guy who was in the league for 2 or 3 years that didn't really do anything, and made him an all-pro. And I'm talking about Patrick Queen. I remember being in the division, a fan of like a team in the division, people talking about Patrick Queen being such a bust, and just, I mean, he wasn't as bad as Devin Bush, but he wasn't very good. And it was just like, this guy's just whatever. And this year he was an all-pro. Like, you can't really...
Him and Roquan Smith.
That takes something special to put both of them in there, and especially a guy who doesn't have a pedigree like that. But either way, that's Mike McDonald, and I think that's a pretty good hire there. Now, real quick, moving to our next coach, I want you to just give me a letter. That's it. Just a letter on what you think the grade is of the hire of Dan Quinn.
D for Dan.
Yeah, that was a messy one. I'm going to put a meme on this video, like right here, right now. It's going to show up, so y'all are going to have to check it out. It's hilarious. They thought they were going to get Ben Johnson, and Ben Johnson showed up and asked for all the money, and they said no. And so, yeah, Dan Quinn it is. Dan Quinn it is. Dan Quinn had an okay tenure as a head coach, but I think, in my opinion, his problem was that he's a defensive coach, but his defenses were never that good. And the only time he did anything super good and making the Super Bowl was when he had, maybe a guy that might be pretty good at being an offensive coordinator, Kyle Shanahan. That was how they got to a Super Bowl and got an MVP season out of Matt Ryan. So what do you think about this hire in totality?
I mean, it was, clearly they put all their eggs in the Ben Johnson basket, and he bailed on them because they weren't willing to pay him enough. But, it's kind of just low hanging fruit. He's the guy that's been around the league for a little bit. He had, that Falcons defense the year that they played in the Super Bowl. It was a solid defense. They had some guys on that team that certainly played well. Vic Beasley had his one good season that year. I mean, that's just one guy, but he put together some good defenses, but it was never something that he was able to replicate. My goodness, replicate year to year.
Yeah.
And, it kind of reminded me of the Ron Rivera, Cam Newton, Panthers era, where they would have a nice season and then they followed up with a down year. Then they'd come back and have a nice season and then it'd be another down year, and then ultimately decided to part ways with those guys. Kind of similar with him in his Falcons era, but, it's kind of odd when you see a team go out and get the defensive coordinator who, one, doesn't have the greatest head coaching resume, and two, his last appearance in an NFL game was his defense getting trounced by a 7 seed.
Yeah. And a 7 with let's just say little talent on the offense, honestly. So
lots of young guys. They've never been in a playoff game before, and they're playing at home nonetheless. A questionable hire for sure. They just wanted to get a guy in there who has coached in the league before, and sure they made a mistake in putting all their eggs in the Ben Johnson basket and it fell through. But in a way, I don't know. I don't want to say I don't blame them for playing it safe with a guy like Dan Quinn, who's probably not going to do a whole lot for you, but they might be decent.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe there weren't a whole lot of greater guys out there I don't know. I'm not a fan of the hire, but it's a crap situation for him that Ben Johnson fell through.
If you're going to go this way, I don't see why you don't go Mike Vrabel. But the one thing I will say in a positive light about this hire is being a defensive head coach, their defense is the side of the ball right now that has kind of not much talent, as they traded away a lot of it at the deadline with their 2 edge rushers, and they just have some iffy spots in the the linebacker and secondary ranks. Their offense, though, is a decent-ish unit. There are pieces there. Obviously, the receivers is a pretty good room. You have Jahan Dotson, Scary Terry. You got who else? Curtis Samuel. A second overall pick that'll get you a quarterback. The line has a couple guys. They need to patch that up a little bit, but something they can handle. But the defense is pretty raw. They have Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne. That's kind of it.
That secondary was historically bad. That was bad.
I think it could be good in that light, to where you get a guy who's really going to be able to take care of this defense. And if Eric Bieniemy stays, especially with what he did last year with that offense, Sam Howell was leading the league in passing yards for a good chunk of the season, but he
also being the most sacked quarterback in the league. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's something that I think it could work out potentially. It's just not the prettiest hire either. So I want to jump through the next few hires pretty quickly, starting with the Patriots. Gerard Mayo coming in after Bill Belichick. My quick little take on it is just I'm a little concerned that it's just going to be like a Bill Belichick Jr. He's never played anywhere in his career else than New England. He never coached anywhere outside of New England, not like as a position coach or anything. I just would be a little worried that maybe those Belichickian ways are going to just stick around, and I feel like they're a little archaic at this point. Maybe it's fine. Maybe he's cognitive enough of that particular situation that he fixes it. But what do you think?
I wasn't, it's not the hire I necessarily. No, I wasn't shocked. It wasn't the hire that I wanted necessarily. Going out and getting Vrabel, I think that would have been a nice hire, but I think they decided from the get-go that, if Bill was going to walk, then we needed to have a guy to step in immediately. And given that Gerard Mayo had previously, last offseason, he took, I think, a couple head coaching interviews. They saw him as a guy fit to fill in for Belichick if he did decide to leave. Then he did, and so, next day or 2 days later, they announced him.
Yeah.
So, and what you have to say about him never being anywhere else in the league other than New England, that's a fair concern. It is good, though, that he's been around, so he's aware of the culture. Maybe what we can hope for is that he'll be able to implement some of the good parts of Belichick and not the bad parts of Belichick that were tone deaf to the direction that the league's gone in.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful for the hire, as any fan would be for a head coaching hire, unless you're a Commies fan. But I'm not gonna expect a ton out of him. I'll have to see it before I can believe it. He's only ever been a linebackers coach, so if he flops, then it's like, what did you expect? It is what it is.
I think I saw something that said after he took those interviews last year, they wrote into his contract that he was guaranteed to be the next New England coach. I'm not entirely sure that is completely true, but I'm pretty positive I read that somewhere. If you're interested, go check it out and leave it in the comments below if you find it or not. Either way, we'll go to our next coach, Raheem Morris, the Falcons. He was their interim for a year and went 4-7, or about a year. That was in between Dan Quinn and Arthur Smith being their head coach. And he's had a head coaching stint in 2009, 2011. I don't know. What's your brief thoughts on this hire?
Kind of similar to to me, I think it's kind of similar to the Dan Quinn hire. It's like, it's kind of low hanging fruit. He's another guy who doesn't have the greatest. He has a worse head coaching resume than Dan Quinn did. Does not have a good record as a head coach. He did some good things with that Rams defense, given what they had. But he wasn't their head coach. He was coordinating. So who knows? Maybe he's learned from his past issues that he had with the Bucks and like you said, when he was interim with the Falcons. But it kind of seemed like Atlanta just wanted to go out and get a guy they were comfortable with. They knew him from being in the building previously, so they kind of settled on him. Quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if he was no longer coaching for him 2-3 years from now. I'm not a super big fan of that hire.
Yeah, that's another one. Like what you said about the Rams defense being really good with him. That's very true. And there wasn't much talent to work with there. Obviously, right. Ernest Jones is an okay linebacker. Aaron Donald's Aaron Donald. But then you have the two rookies, Kobe Turner and Byron Young, who did really well. And I don't even really know who's in their secondary right now. John Johnson's back in LA, and I don't know. But either way, the point is not a whole lot of talent. You made the unit good. Moving on. Next is Antonio Pierce. This is one that I am very glad this happened. This was an A+ hire. They botched it last time with Rich Bisaccia. I think he deserved a chance in LA or Las Vegas, for what he did. Now, granted, I don't think he did it quite as good as Antonio Pierce did. He won 5-ish games with Aiden O'Connell. 5-ish games ain't great, but Aiden O'Connell. Let's talk about that. That's a job. You did your job, and you deserve this job because of that. Yeah. Now you're going to get I believe they have the 8th pick, 13th, something like that. It's in that range. And you have a shot at grabbing a quarterback. Will they get one? Yeah, we'll see. But either way, he deserved this hire. What do you think?
I agree. Yeah. You never really want to elevate someone to be the interim head coach. But, he did, like you said, he performed better as a coach than the head coach did. So, why not give him a shot? They must not have. My guess is that they probably looked out the landscape of available coaches and they're like, the top guys that we might want, we don't really know if we can pull them in. So they're like, you know what? You've earned it. We're going to give you a shot. And if it doesn't work out, then so be it. You were, this time last year, you weren't even a coach. You weren't even a head coach. You weren't being considered as a head coach. We just brought you up because we fired our previous head coach. It's give him a shot. He's earned it. So I'm glad to see that there's still some hope out there for those guys that get brought up into the interim roles, and if they perform well, then they can have a chance to prove themselves in a full-time head coaching position.
Yeah, and one thing I thought about is this Raiders team has sneaky good talent. It's kind of under the radar here. You have, Josh Jacobs, impending free agent, but you have Michael Mayer you just got. You have Colton Miller, one of the better tackles in the league. You have Devontae Adams for now-ish. We'll see about that one. Well, he's there. At this moment, he's there. Jacoby Myers is a good number 2. I feel like I'm missing a receiver right now. That was also pretty good. No, maybe not.
Hunter Renfrow was good at one time, but he's kind of disappeared from the offense.
Defensively, obviously, Max Crosby's one of the better edge rushers in the league. Tyree Wilson, not the best year in his rookie year, but lots of talent there for sure. Nate Hobbs is a solid corner. Robert Spillane had a heck of a year. There's a lot of things to work with. It may not be amazing, but we've seen some Raiders teams in the recent past that were not great. So he's got things to work with. Moving to our next one, Dave Canales, the former Tampa Bay offensive coordinator who did really good work with Baker Mayfield, now going to be the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. What are your thoughts here, briefly?
Yeah, you see this a lot in the NFL where you got players, coaches shifting from one team to another team within the division. So I think that certainly had something to do with that hire. But seeing the way that he was able to get the most out of Baker Mayfield and in that offense, make their guys look decent, on that. This was a team that we were expecting to be drafting top 5 going into this offseason, and we see them making a playoff run. Gave the Lions a run for they were dangerously close to playing for a shot to go to the Super Bowl. Yeah. But he made Baker look like a pretty good quarterback. I think we could all say it was the best year of his career. So there's hope for what he can do with Bryce Young and those guys. You just gotta, to get the most out of Bryce Young and that head coach, you gotta make sure that you're putting guys around them on the offense to maximize their success. So there's hope for Panthers fans and for Bryce Young.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, to put a negative on this hire, is we talk about how he did a lot of good work with Baker, and I said it myself. He did. However, being someone who is a Baker fan, I think Baker is a starter in this league for sure. I did before the season started when people were saying that he was going to be, out of the league after this year and stuff. He had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and Cade Otton is an okay tight end, and the line is okay. And I mean, there was things to work with, and I especially Mike.
They did their run game was bottom of the league. They were last in their run game. So
pass blocking was good. The run game had to be fixed. It needs to be fixed. That's something I've talked about in a video I posted yesterday. But either way, I think Baker's talented. So how much did Canales do himself? It's not like Baker had an MVP year. He just had a really good year. So, I mean, that could just be the product of Mike Evans, Chris Godwin being legitimate receivers instead of having a, pretty good OBJ in Cleveland. Like, I don't know. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate there. Wanted to throw it in there. And then our final head coach, Brian Callahan, formerly the offensive coordinator of the Bengals, and now is the Tennessee Titans head coach. First off, you fired Mike Vrabel. And I think I said this last episode, maybe. When you fire a coach and everybody starts asking, what team does that coach want to go to, you made a mistake. Granted, he didn't go anywhere. The point stands. What are your thoughts on this hire?
The best way I can explain it is that they simply just wanted to go a different direction to keep up with the times. I think he's kind of in a similar boat to Belichick, albeit he's about 25 years younger than Bill Belichick. So he doesn't have that age going against him, but I think there were probably some teams that maybe were concerned about Vrabel's philosophy, that maybe him as a head coach and his philosophies were out of date. And that could be, I think that's the reason why Tennessee let him go, is just because they recognize, you've been a great coach for us, but we just want to go a different direction. And can I blame him for that? No. Does it suck? Yeah, I mean, it sucks. You got to make decisions sometimes that are going to confuse many people and upset many people, but I think it's clear that that's the direction they were going in. And, to go out and get a guy who's coordinating one of the, this season is a little bit of you can put an asterisk next to this season, but past few years, you got one of the top offenses in the league. You're pulling their offensive coordinator away to come be your head coach. I think it's a decent step forward. It'll just come down to performing and how they build out the roster. What's Will Levis going to look like? Is he going to be able to develop as a starting quarterback in the league? What's Brian Callahan going to do to help Will Levis? What guys are they going to put around Will Levis? They don't have a ton of great options skill-wise. You got a young Traylon Burks who hasn't proved himself. D-Hop, you can expect, I don't know that we're going to see him in Tennessee next year. Same case with Derrick Henry. So there's a lot. Brian Callahan's going to have free reign over what he wants to do. And I think, like I said, I think it's just Tennessee wanting to modernize a little bit.
Yeah, once again, to play the devil's advocate with this hire, just to put some negativity on it, not to just be the bearer of bad news, but just to be realistic in a frame, is I don't really – this one kind of came out of nowhere. I don't really feel like anybody heard this guy being a head coach candidate at all. And as you said, he did have one of the better offenses in the last few years. It's not terribly hard to have a good offense when you have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, there's a lot of talent here. Tyler Boyd, wide receiver 3, that one still is a little crazy to me. I mean, you still the X's and the O's matter, but the Jimmies and the Joes cover up a lot. So, and when the Joe's Joe Burrow, you can be pretty sure that that's going to work out well as there. I guess I should say the Jamars and the Joes in that sense. But either way,
yeah, there you go.
I'm a dad now. Dad jokes, great.
Good job. You're getting there.
I like what you said about Mike Vrabel just a minute ago, because I didn't actually warn you about this. I have 3 takeaways from this coaching cycle that I wanted to share, and you really kind of highlighted one. I think this coaching carousel changed a few things in the NFL that we haven't had this happen in a while. First being the power dynamic between coaches and owners. I feel like for the last ever, coaches have really tried to have their leg on top of the owner a little bit. Whether they do or don't, it's been an attempt. I mean, obviously, Belichick kind of been everything himself. Vrabel, kind of a stem from that. He was kind of doing that in Tennessee. He didn't have the GM spot, but he was still apparently a very high role. You also have, there was somebody else that I actually had mentioned in this topic too, but that wasn't.
Could have been Pete Carroll.
Yes, thank you, Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll, there you go. I told myself not to forget it, and that was the one. He had a big leg in Seattle, and they wanted to get that out of there. Appreciate you. But yeah, that's number one. The second is offense may not be all that anymore because, as you said, yeah, a lot of the coaches who go deep into the playoffs are offensive coaches. But why are we seeing Jim Harbaugh isn't necessarily an offensive head coach? McDonald, defensive. Dan Quinn, defensive. Raheem Morris, defensive. Jerome Mayo, defensive. Antonio Pierce, I believe he was defensive. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he was originally. Honestly,
I'm blanking.
Yeah, Canales and Callahan are the only ones that are for sure offensive guys. So what is that saying? Why are we seeing the defense? Is it because maybe they're trying to counteract all of this offense? We'll see. That's just something I kind of want. It's not really a topic to debate right now. I feel like that's something we'll have to watch play out. But I wanted to bring it up. And the last thing is I think this is probably the first time ever that the next year's coaching carousel has already started. Like, I'm interested to see if Dan Quinn lasts more than a year. I think if they start off rocky, there's a real world where he's out already after one season. Or same with maybe a Gerard Mayo. Maybe they give him a 1-year leash because maybe not. They don't have to go to a Super Bowl, but because that roster's not there right now. But when you have guys on the market like Bill Belichick and Mike Vrabel, and there's obviously been the talk for years of all these college coaches moving to the NFL, and so that could bring a wave of guys like Ryan Day coming over into the NFL. I just wonder, how long are these leashes on some of these teams that have hired these coaches? Obviously, I think Harbaugh and McDonald are probably completely safe. I think they're going to get 2 years minimum. I don't think that's any question. But I wouldn't see why anyone else on this list couldn't be fired after 1 year. And not to say that they should be, but like we said, Canales and Callahan, they're 2 guys that weren't really head coaching candidates before, and they kind of came out of left field. Antonio Pierce, he's just an interim. Just interesting there. Once again, any thoughts you have on those real quick?
No, yeah, I think another thing to add, you were talking about some maybe some college guys moving up to the NFL. You've got plenty of young, bright minds in coordinating positions within other franchises. Like you and I were both talking a lot about Kubiak from the Niners, and you got those guys are littered all over the league. So it's only a matter of time before Bobby Slowick as well. That's another guy who's he's gonna be a hot name on the market next year whenever head coaching jobs come open.
And a big part of that has been Ben Johnson as well, because he was expected to be a head coach this year, but just decided himself not to be. He wasn't hired away from the Commanders. He just decided not to go. So that's another big one in that sense as well.
But no, it's certainly, I think it says a lot about how teams aren't just looking for an offensive guy to fill their position. They want more than just a guy who specializes in offense. And I think that must have played a big factor in these hires, is that the offensive minds that they were interviewing, maybe they did not see them quite fit yet for a head coaching position. And so, I think in the next 2 years or so, we're gonna see those offensive hires ramp up a lot more as these guys gain more experience in the league and become a little bit more ready and a little bit more fit to take on a head coaching role.
Yeah, and I just want to say this. I have this is kind of a joke, but I'd be a little interested to see if Nick Saban would ever go back to the NFL. I know he's like a bajillion years old, but leaving college football, to me, I have to feel like part of the reason that happened was all the NIL stuff, and that was just foreign to him, and it was something he wasn't probably very comfortable with. Not that I know what he's feeling, but I just am interested to see if maybe that tainting his view of college football would bring him back to the NFL, even if not as a head coach, but just something. I'm just curious. What is that guy going to do for the rest of his life? Nothing. He's going to coach football on his couch, if anything else. So might as well do it in a really good league. But either way, I don't want to get too much into that. We have just one more topic for this episode, and it is Super Bowl 5? I actually don't even know. I just blanked on it. Or 55, right?
58.
What is it? 14?
Super Bowl 58.
58. Wow. Okay, not even close. Here we are.
Sure enough.
It's 2024. Kansas City, San Francisco. What is your biggest matchup in this game that you think is gonna really cause a lot of change for this game, I guess?
I think it'll come down to the Chiefs' run defense and the Niners' run game. We've seen at times this year where the Chiefs' defense has looked almost unstoppable, and we've also seen at times this year where the Chiefs' run defense has been susceptible to, gash plays. I believe the Packers in that Packers game, they kind of had their way with the Chiefs in the run game. Yeah. So it's just going to depend on who shows up. Is it going to be Christian McCaffrey in that run game, or is the Chiefs defensive line going to be able to stand up to him and hold him and force Brock Purdy to really take over and lead this offense himself? You could say Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes against the Niners defense, whatever. They're going to do their thing. The Niners defense is going to do what they do the same way that the Chiefs offense is going to do what they do. It's going to come down to those guys in between. Who's going to step up in this game? And so I think it'll really come down to the Chiefs run defense that determines how this game goes.
I agree with that. I also, being a person who is realistic on Brock Purdy, just being honest, I think he's a big factor. The run game versus the run defense is, I think, for sure probably number one. But number two is Brock Purdy, because everybody's talked about how he is not probably an elite quarterback, which he isn't. I mean, it doesn't take much to see that. To me, I did a quarterback ranking video recently, and people got really up in arms about that. But because I put him over and under, and I rank people different ways. But to me, you have to base things off of stats and an eye test at the same time. But that also can look different for different people. You also have to weigh the output, the expectations. And Brock Purdy is a mix of, your expectations aren't high because you don't have a ton of talent with him. But he's got a good team. So his personal expectations are lower than his team's. You also have, the stats could be good, but the eye test shows that he's throwing open receivers. He's throwing, it's the easy things he does, which is great. You got to do those things. But can you do it? And it's difficult. I will say, the last two games have shown some things of that nature that could be done. Does that make him instantly elite? No. We've got to see him consistently be the closer. And that's what makes great quarterbacks. Is he going to be able to do that? I don't know. Head-to-head with Mahomes, there's going to be pressure there in the Super Bowl. That's different than an an NFC Championship game. You've got to prove it on the biggest stage of biggest stages. This is going to be an interesting one. And to me, I'm going to lead this straight now into my prediction of the game. We saw this game 4 years ago, and I don't think it's really changed. The one thing, in my opinion, that has changed is the most dynamic player on the field is Christian McCaffrey instead of probably even Patrick Mahomes. He's probably more dynamic because that guy throws passes too sometimes. And over under half a pass thrown in the Super Bowl for Christian McCaffrey. What do you think? I guess. You think that happens or not?
It's got to. I'm gonna go over. I'm gonna go over just for the
That's my
fun of
point.
it.
They didn't have that last time, and that's going to be big. And I don't remember the scores, but last time we saw this matchup, at halftime, the Chiefs were down, and it was a game where the Chiefs kind of like what it looked like the Niners just did to the Lions, where they were kind of out of it. It looked like they were going to cakewalk to the end of it, and then boom, Patrick Mahomes shows up, wins himself his first Super Bowl. That is probably how I'm going to see this game playing as out too, because as we've said, the Chiefs' offense is a little shorthanded. They're going to get going probably later in the game, and I think they do close it out and win the game, and the Chiefs do. I think they win. Score prediction-wise, I'm going to go like 27-23.
Okay. Solid.
What you got?
I don't want to piggyback off of you necessarily just for the sake of piggybacking off of you, but I've also got the Chiefs in this game. I see the Chiefs looking dominant at the right times, going on the road twice in the playoffs and getting wins over teams that I believe at Buffalo, they were not favored. I believe Buffalo was a favorite in that game. Were they not?
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
Buffalo was.
Yes. Yeah, as they go on the road as underdogs both times, pull out 2 wins there. And then you see San Francisco in their games where they are in fact the favorites, but they look a little questionable at times. Ultimately pull it out, which is what's important. But, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier in the Chiefs-Ravens recap. You got Pat Mahomes and you got Brock Purdy. If my life depended on it, I'm picking I'm picking Pat Mahomes to pull this game out before I'm taking Purdy. Albeit, the rest of the team is relevant as well. The Niners have a great team. But
so did the Ravens.
So did the Ravens. The Ravens made the Niners look silly on primetime in the regular season, and we just saw what Kansas City was able to do in Baltimore. But I would have to agree that I think it'll look roughly similar to that former Chiefs Niners matchup in the Super Bowl, where we get a kind of it's an ugly game for a while, but then you see the Chiefs pull away. I hope it's not an ugly game. I think it'll be a little bit higher scoring than that game was, albeit the final score of that Super Bowl didn't quite indicate how the game actually played out, because I think the Chiefs towards the end of that sort of piled some points on.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I'm also going to take the Chiefs to win. Score prediction, I'm going to go, I think it'll be, I'm curious, I want to see what the over-under is. 47.5. 47.5 is the over-under.
So under at this point. I picked only to be, it was 40.
You said 27-23, didn't you?
Oh, yes, I did. I can't do math. So I'm just over.
Yeah. I think, I don't want it to be a lower scoring game. However, I think it will be, because I think the strong suit of both these teams is the defense. And, the Chiefs don't quite have the guys on their offense to go out and make plays like they have in the past. So I'd have to, with that 47.5, I'd have to take the under. My guess on the score, I'll go, give me 24-20. Just under that 47.5. I'm going to say 24-20.
24-20. I gotcha.
So we both have 4-point margins there.
Yeah, we do. What is the spread? I want to check that real quick while we're sitting here.
San Fran -2.
-2. Okay. Yeah, and
this is as of 5 hours ago. Okay. So
I wonder if that probably got closer, I'm assuming. Okay. So yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, I think that's all we have for this episode. If you don't have anything else to add in.
I don't believe so. I think we covered everything pretty well.
Right, yeah. All right, well, thank you guys for watching. We really appreciate you tuning in watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify. Please tune in every single week, as we will be doing this throughout the offseason, just keeping y'all up to date on any NFL news that we can. But either way, thank y'all for watching, and we'll see y'all in the next one.